"I sew to earn crumbs of bread," says six-year-old girl in the millionaire CEO's new factory. He hears this and turns pale, shocked. Before we share this touching account of despair and solitude, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more powerful stories. The sound of sewing machines hummed through the vast factory floor like a mechanical symphony, but nothing could have prepared CEO Michael Harrison for what he was about to hear. At 34, he had built Harrison Textiles from the ground up, transforming it into one of America's most successful clothing manufacturers. Today was supposed to be a routine inspection of his newest facility in downtown Detroit, a state-of-the-art operation that employed over 300 workers. Michael walked through the rows of industrial sewing stations, his expensive Italian leather shoes clicking against the polished concrete floor. Workers nodded respectfully as he passed, some stealing glances at his perfectly tailored navy suit and confident stride. He had always prided himself on maintaining fair working conditions, better wages than most competitors, and strict adherence to labor laws. His reputation in the industry was built on ethical practices and treating employees with dignity. The factory buzzed with productive energy. Rows upon rows of skilled seamstresses worked diligently on various garments, evening gowns, business suits, children's clothing. The morning sun streamed through large windows, casting geometric shadows across the workspace. Michael paused occasionally to speak with supervisors, checking production numbers and quality standards. Everything seemed to be running smoothly, exactly as he expected from his meticulously managed operation. As he approached the children's clothing section, where colorful fabrics created a rainbow of tiny dresses and miniature suits, something caught his attention. A small voice, so quiet and fragile that he almost missed it entirely among the mechanical sounds of the factory. But when the words reached his ears, his blood turned to ice. "I sew these little dresses so I can buy bread, sir," came the tiny voice, barely audible above the humming machines. "My mama says if I work real hard and don't make mistakes, maybe we can afford meat this week. She's been eating just crackers so I can have real food." Michael's head snapped toward the sound, his heart hammering against his ribcage like a trapped bird. There, hunched over an adult-sized industrial sewing machine, sat a little girl who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Her golden hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, secured with a rubber band that had seen better days, and her small fingers worked the delicate fabric with surprising skill and precision that spoke of far too much practice for someone her age. She wore a faded pink dress that had clearly been mended multiple times, with careful patches covering holes and frayed edges. Her shoes had visible holes that she tried to cover with silver duct tape, and her thin legs swung back and forth as she reached for the sewing machine pedals. The sight was so wrong, so fundamentally disturbing, that Michael felt physically sick. "What? What did you just say?" Michael's voice came out as barely a whisper, his face draining of all color as the implications of what he was witnessing began to sink in. The little girl looked up with the biggest, most innocent blue eyes he had ever seen. They were crystal clear, the color of a summer sky, and filled with a hope and determination that no child should need to possess. "I said I sew for breadcrumbs. Sir, my mama told me to work extra hard today because the nice man who owns this place was coming to visit." Her smile was heartbreaking in its purity, completely unaware of the bomb she had just dropped, or the legal and moral catastrophe she represented. Michael felt the world tilt on its axis. This couldn't be happening. Child labor in his factory, in his carefully monitored, ethically operated business. The very thought made him sick to his stomach. But beyond that, there was something else. Something about those eyes that struck him like lightning. They were familiar in a way that made his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name, a recognition that went deeper than memory. The factory floor around him seemed to fade away as he stared at this small person who shouldn't exist in his world, who represented everything he had built his reputation on preventing. Yet here she was, sewing with the dedication of an adult worker, talking about bread and meat as if they were luxuries beyond imagination. "Sweetheart, what's your name?" Michael asked, crouching down to the little girl's eye level, his voice trembling despite his efforts to remain calm and professional. The factory floor suddenly felt too hot, too crowded, though he barely noticed the curious stares from nearby workers who had stopped their tasks to watch the unprecedented scene of their CEO kneeling beside a child, his usually composed demeanor cracking visibly. His knees pressed against the cold concrete floor as he balanced himself, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. This child, this impossibly small person, was operating machinery that required skill and experience. Her tiny hands moved with practiced efficiency, suggesting this wasn't her first day or even her first week working in his factory. "I'm Emma, sir," she replied, with the kind of politeness that seemed far too mature for someone her age, the formality that spoke of careful coaching from an adult who understood the importance of making a good impression. "Mama says I should always be respectful to important people, especially the ones who give us work. Are you very important?" Her innocence was both charming and heartbreaking, especially given the circumstances that had brought her to this moment. Michael's throat constricted, as if someone had wrapped a hand around it and squeezed. "Emma, that's a beautiful name. Where is your mother right now? She should be here with you." The question came out more sharply than he intended, his business instincts kicking in as he began to understand the scope of what was happening under his own roof. The little girl's expression shifted slightly, a shadow of sadness crossing her angelic features like a cloud passing over the sun. "Mama works the night shift at the diner downtown. She gets real tired because she has to work until 4 in the morning. So I come here during the day to help make money. The nice lady at the front desk said it was okay if I was quiet and worked hard and didn't bother anyone." She paused, then added with devastating matter-of-factness, "Mama cries sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping. She says she's sorry I have to work, but we need the money real bad." The words hit Michael like physical blows, each revelation worse than the last. Not only was there a child working in his factory, but she was essentially unsupervised, working to support her mother, who was clearly struggling to make ends meet while pulling double shifts at multiple jobs. The implications were staggering, and he could already imagine the media firestorm that would erupt if this got out, the lawsuits, the criminal charges, the complete destruction of everything he had built. But beyond the business concerns, something else gnawed at him with increasing intensity. Those eyes, that delicate bone structure, even the way she held her head when she spoke, it all seemed hauntingly familiar. A memory flickered at the edge of his consciousness, something from years ago that he had tried desperately to forget. A connection that his rational mind rejected, but his heart recognized with growing certainty. "Emma, what's your last name, honey?" he asked, though part of him dreaded the answer with every fiber of his being. "Thompson, sir. Emma Thompson. Mama says my daddy went away before I was born, but she won't tell me why or where he went." The innocent confession hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest, stealing his breath and making his vision blur around the edges. "She just says he had to leave and that it wasn't his fault or mine, but sometimes I wonder if I did something wrong before I was even born." Thompson. The name reverberated through his mind like an echo in a canyon, bringing with it a flood of memories he had spent years trying to suppress. 7 years ago, there had been a woman named Sarah Thompson, beautiful, kind, with those same striking blue eyes that seemed to see straight into his soul. They had dated for 6 months, and he had fallen harder than he ever thought possible, planning a future that included rings and vows and forever. But then came the accident that changed everything. The memory came flooding back with devastating clarity, as vivid and painful as if it had happened yesterday instead of 7 years ago. Michael had been driving home from a business dinner on a cold February night when his car hit a patch of black ice. The Mercedes had spun out of control and slammed into a massive oak tree at nearly 50 miles per hour, the impact so severe that the first responders weren't sure he would survive. He spent 3 weeks in a medically induced coma, hovering between life and death while machines kept his body functioning. When he finally regained consciousness, it was to discover he had suffered a severe traumatic brain injury, multiple fractures, and internal injuries that required several additional surgeries. The doctors warned that his recovery would be long and uncertain, that he might never fully regain his cognitive abilities or physical strength. For months, he drifted in and out of consciousness, his memory fractured and unreliable. When he was finally coherent enough to ask about Sarah, to beg the nurses to call her, he discovered that his phone had been destroyed in the accident. His address book, his computer, everything that contained her contact information had been lost or damaged beyond recovery. When he finally recovered enough to leave the hospital and return to his apartment, he found that Sarah's belongings were gone. Her key was on the kitchen table, along with a brief note written in her careful handwriting. "I'm sorry, Michael. I need to start fresh somewhere else. Please don't try to find me. Take care of yourself." The note had been dated just 2 weeks after the accident, when he was still unconscious and fighting for his life. She had waited only 14 days before deciding their relationship wasn't worth fighting for, before choosing to abandon him when he needed her most, or at least that's what he had believed for 7 years. He had hired private investigators, spent thousands of dollars and countless sleepless nights trying to find her, but Sarah Thompson had effectively disappeared from the face of the earth. Eventually, heartbroken and exhausted, he had forced himself to move on. He threw himself into building his business empire, convincing himself that love was a luxury he couldn't afford, that people would always disappoint him when he needed them most. Now, staring into Emma's innocent face, the mathematics were impossible to ignore. 7 years since Sarah disappeared, a 6-year-old daughter, those unmistakable blue eyes that had haunted his dreams for years, the same delicate features, the same stubborn tilt of the chin when she was concentrating. "Emma," he said carefully, his voice barely steady as his world shifted beneath his feet. "Does your mama ever talk about your daddy? About what he looked like or what kind of person he was?" The little girl tilted her head thoughtfully, her small hands never stopping their work on the delicate pink fabric of what appeared to be a child's dress. "Sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping, I hear her crying and talking to his picture. She says Daddy had kind eyes and strong hands, and that he would have loved me very much if he could have stayed." She paused, looking up at him with startling directness that made his heart skip several beats. "She says he was smart and worked real hard, and that maybe someday when I'm older, she'll tell me more about him. You have kind eyes too, mister. Are you sad about something?" The question pierced through his carefully constructed emotional walls like an arrow finding its mark. Was he sad? He was devastated, confused, angry at the cruel trick fate had played on him. If this child was truly his daughter, and every instinct, every fiber of his being screamed that she was, then Sarah had robbed him of 6 years of his daughter's life. 6 years of bedtime stories, first steps, first words, birthdays, Christmas mornings, scraped knees that needed kissing, nightmares that needed soothing. But looking at Emma's worn clothes and the way she spoke about working for bread, the casual mention of her mother crying and eating crackers so her daughter could have real food, he realized that his anger toward Sarah was complicated by a growing understanding of her desperation. She must have been terrified, probably penniless, believing he was dead or permanently disabled from the accident. Perhaps she thought she was protecting Emma from a father who might never recover, who couldn't provide for them. The realization hit him like another collision. While he had been unconscious and then slowly recovering, Sarah had been pregnant and alone, probably scared out of her mind, with no way to contact him and no idea if he would survive. She had made an impossible choice based on incomplete information, and both she and Emma had paid the price ever since. The confirmation hit Michael like a physical blow, and he had to grip the edge of the industrial sewing table to steady himself as the full weight of the revelation crashed over him. Sarah Elizabeth Thompson, the same woman who had shared his bed, his dreams, his heart for those beautiful 6 months 7 years ago, the same woman who had vanished from his life, taking with her a secret that would have changed everything if he had only known. His daughter, this beautiful, brave little girl was his daughter, and she was sitting in his own factory, working to survive while he lived in luxury just floors above her, completely unaware of her existence. The cruel irony of it made him dizzy with rage and heartbreak. "Sir, are you okay?" Emma asked, her young voice filled with genuine concern that no child should have to feel for a strange adult. "You look like you might be sick. Mama gets that same look sometimes when she's real worried about money or when the landlord comes by asking for rent." Michael realized he must look terrible, pale, shaken, probably on the verge of tears or vomiting or both. Around them, the factory had grown noticeably quieter, as workers pretended not to stare at the unprecedented scene of their powerful CEO having what appeared to be an emotional breakdown next to a child sewing station. Whispers were beginning to circulate, and he knew that within hours, rumors would be flying throughout the entire company. I'm fine, sweetheart," he managed, though he was anything but fine. His mind raced through possibilities, implications, and the crushing weight of what this revelation meant for all of their lives. "Emma, I need to meet your mama. It's very important that I talk to her as soon as possible. Can you tell me where she works?" "Rosie's Diner on 5th Street, Emma replied readily, her trust in him absolute and heartbreaking. "But she won't be there until tonight because she works the dinner shift there after she sleeps a little bit. She's probably at home right now trying to rest, but she doesn't sleep very good during the day because the neighbors upstairs are really loud and our windows don't keep out much noise." The matter-of-fact way she discussed her mother's exhausting schedule, the casual mention of their housing problems, broke Michael's heart all over again. Here was his child, his own flesh and blood, living in conditions that no child should have to endure, while he owned multiple properties and had more money than he could spend in several lifetimes. He looked around the factory floor with new eyes, seeing it not as the successful business venture he was so proud of, but as the place where his 6-year-old daughter, his daughter, was forced to work to help her struggling mother survive. The irony was almost too cruel to bear. Here he was, a millionaire who could afford anything money could buy, while his own child was sewing for breadcrumbs just floors below his executive office, her small fingers working machinery that should never have been touched by someone her age. "Emma, I need you to stop working now," he said gently but firmly, his voice carrying an authority that he rarely used, but that brooked no argument. "In fact, I need you to come with me. We're going to have a very important conversation with your mama, and then we're going to make sure you never have to work in a factory again." The little girl's eyes widened with worry, and she clutched the fabric she had been working on as if it were a lifeline. "But sir, if I don't finish these dresses, they won't pay me, and Mama needs the money for rent. We're already 2 weeks behind, and Mr. Peterson said he'd make us leave if we can't catch up by Friday." Her voice rose with panic as she contemplated disappointing the adults who depended on her small contributions to their survival. The desperation in her small voice nearly undid him completely. While he had been living in his penthouse apartment, dining at 5-star restaurants and buying expensive suits without a second thought, his daughter had been worrying about rent money and eviction notices, working her small fingers to the bone just to help her mother keep a roof over their heads. "Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he knelt down to her level again, "I promise you that your mama will never have to worry about rent money again. Never. And you will never have to work like this again. That's a promise from me to you, and I always keep my promises." The hope that bloomed in her eyes was so bright it nearly blinded him, but it was mixed with the kind of wariness that came from too many disappointments in her short life. "Are you sure, mister? Because Mama says people make lots of promises they don't mean to keep, and I don't want her to be sadder if things don't work out." The wisdom in her words, the protective instinct she felt for her mother despite being just 6 years old, told him everything he needed to know about the kind of child Sarah had raised despite their difficult circumstances. 2 hours later, Michael sat in his Mercedes outside a rundown apartment building in one of Detroit's rougher neighborhoods, Emma buckled safely in the passenger seat beside him. She had marveled at the leather interior, the way the seat warmed up at the touch of a button, and the smooth purr of the engine. But now she seemed nervous as they sat looking up at the building where she and her mother lived. The building was old, probably built in the 1960s, with cracked brick walls and windows that had been repaired with tape more times than replaced with glass. The parking lot was full of potholes, and several of the streetlights were broken, leaving dark patches where anything could be hiding. It was the kind of neighborhood where people minded their own business because getting involved could be dangerous, where children learned to be quiet and invisible to avoid attracting the wrong kind of attention. "Are you sure Mama won't be mad that I left work early?" Emma asked for the fourth time, clutching a small stuffed rabbit that Michael had bought her from the gift shop next to the factory. It was the first toy he had ever given his daughter, and the significance of that fact wasn't lost on him. 6 years of birthdays and Christmases he had missed. 6 years of not being there when she needed him most. "I promise she won't be mad," Michael assured her, though he wasn't entirely certain how Sarah would react to seeing him after 7 years of silence. Would she be angry that he had found them? Relieved that the secret was finally out? Terrified that he would try to take Emma away from her? He had no idea what she had told Emma about her father, or if she had ever planned to tell the truth. Through the apartment building's grimy lobby window, he could see a few residents coming and going. Most looked tired, worn down by the kind of poverty that ground people into dust if they weren't strong enough to fight it. Sarah had been fighting it alone for 6 years, raising their daughter in this environment while he lived in luxury, completely unaware of their struggle. "That's our window up there," Emma said, pointing to a third-floor window that had a towel hung up as a makeshift curtain. "Mama says real curtains cost too much money, but the towel works just fine for keeping people from looking in. Sometimes I pretend it's a fancy curtain like in the movies." The casual way she mentioned their poverty, the way she had learned to find joy in small things and make the best of impossible situations, reminded him so much of Sarah it made his chest ache. Sarah had always been optimistic, always able to find something positive, even in difficult circumstances. It seemed she had passed that strength on to their daughter. "Emma, before we go up there, I need to tell you something important," Michael said, turning to face her in the luxurious car that probably cost more than most people in this neighborhood made in several years. "Your mama and I, we knew each other a long time ago, before you were born. We were very close, but something happened that separated us. She probably thought she would never see me again." Emma's eyes widened with interest and hope. "Did you know my daddy too? Was he your friend?" The innocent question hit him like a punch to the gut. How do you tell a 6-year-old that you are her father? How do you explain 7 years of absence without destroying her faith in the adults who are supposed to protect her? "Emma, sweetheart," he began carefully, his heart pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "There's a chance that I might be your daddy. We won't know for sure until your mama and I have a chance to talk, but that's why it's so important for me to see her." The little girl stared at him with those huge blue eyes, processing this information with the serious consideration of someone far older than her years. "Are you going to leave again, if you are my daddy? Because Mama says he had to go away, but she never said if he was coming back." The question broke his heart into a million pieces. "If I am your daddy, Emma, I will never leave you again. Never. That's the most important promise I will ever make." She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded with the gravity of a judge rendering a verdict. "Okay. I think you have honest eyes. Mama taught me how to tell when people are lying, and you don't look like you're lying." As they walked toward the building's entrance, Emma's small hand slipped into his with such natural trust that it nearly brought him to his knees. This beautiful, brave little girl was his daughter, his child, and for 6 years he hadn't even known she existed. The elevator was broken, so they climbed 3 flights of stairs that smelled like cleaning solution and desperation. The carpet in the hallways was worn thin and stained with decades of spilled lives and broken dreams. Emma led him to apartment 3B and pulled a key from around her neck. "Mama gave me my own key in case she's sleeping real hard and doesn't hear me knock," she explained, turning the key in a lock that had been painted over so many times it barely functioned. The apartment was small but spotlessly clean, with furniture that had clearly been bought second-hand but was lovingly maintained. Everything was organized and tidy, from the stack of library books on the coffee table to the small collection of Emma's drawings taped to the refrigerator. It was the home of people who had very little but took pride in what they had. And there, curled up on the couch with a blanket pulled over her head, was Sarah. Sarah was sleeping so deeply that she didn't stir when they entered the apartment, her exhaustion evident in the way she was sprawled across the small couch, as if she had simply collapsed there upon returning from her night shift. Even in sleep, her face showed the strain of years of struggle, fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 7 years ago, a thinness to her cheeks that spoke of too many meals skipped so Emma could eat. But she was still beautiful in that effortless way that had first captured his attention all those years ago. Her blonde hair was longer now, spread across the pillow like spun gold, and even in her worn waitress uniform, she maintained that natural grace that had made him fall in love with her so completely. "Mama works really hard," Emma whispered, setting her new stuffed rabbit gently on the coffee table and tiptoeing across the small living room. "She doesn't sleep very good at night because she has to work, and she doesn't sleep very good during the day because she worries about money and about me. Sometimes I hear her crying, but she tries to be quiet so I won't know." Michael's heart clenched as he watched his daughter demonstrate the kind of mature understanding that no child should need to possess. Emma had learned to be quiet when her mother was sleeping, to worry about adult problems, to carry responsibilities that should have belonged to the grown-ups in her life. The apartment told the story of their lives in heartbreaking detail. The kitchen table was covered with bills, most of them marked with red past due stamps. A job search section from the newspaper was spread out next to applications for second and third jobs. In one corner, Emma's small mattress was pushed against the wall, with her few belongings arranged neatly in a cardboard box that served as a dresser. On the refrigerator, alongside Emma's artwork, were several photographs that made Michael's breath catch in his throat. Pictures of Emma as a baby, as a toddler taking her first steps, blowing out candles on homemade birthday cakes. 6 years of memories that should have included him. 6 years of milestones he had missed while Sarah struggled alone to raise their child. But it was the photograph tucked into the corner of the refrigerator door that nearly brought him to his knees. It was a picture of him and Sarah from 7 years ago, taken at a company picnic just weeks before the accident. They were laughing at something off camera, his arm around her waist, her head thrown back in genuine joy. They looked so young, so happy, so completely unaware of the tragedy that was about to tear their lives apart. "That's my daddy," Emma said softly, following his gaze to the photograph. "Mama says he was the best man she ever knew, and that he loved us both very much, but had to go away. She talks to his picture sometimes when she thinks I'm not looking." The revelation that Sarah had kept his photograph, that she had spoken of him with love rather than bitterness, changed everything he thought he knew about why she had left. If she had hated him, if she had wanted to escape from their relationship, she wouldn't have kept his picture or spoken of him kindly to their daughter. "Mama," Emma said softly, reaching out to gently shake her mother's shoulder. "Mama, wake up. There's someone here to see you, someone really important." Sarah stirred slowly, the way people do when they're pulled from deep, exhausted sleep. She mumbled something incoherent and tried to pull the blanket over her head, but Emma was persistent in the gentle way of children who understand that sometimes adults need help facing difficult things. "Mama, please wake up. It's about Daddy." The word Daddy cut through Sarah's exhaustion like a knife. Her eyes snapped open, and she sat up quickly. her gaze immediately finding Emma and then traveling across the room to where Michael stood frozen by the doorway, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. For a moment, time stopped completely. Sarah's face went through a series of expressions: confusion at seeing Emma home early, concern that something had happened at the factory, and then pure, absolute shock as her brain processed what her eyes were seeing. When their eyes met, Sarah's face went completely white. The worn coffee mug she had been holding slipped from nerveless fingers and shattered on the hardwood floor, sending dark liquid and ceramic shards across the carefully maintained space. "Hello, Sarah," Michael said softly, his voice carrying 7 years of questions, pain, loss, and a hope so fragile he was afraid to acknowledge it. Sarah's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, her eyes darting between Michael and Emma with a look of pure terror. She looked like someone who had just seen a ghost, someone whose carefully constructed world had just collapsed in the span of a heartbeat. "Michael," she whispered, his name barely audible, as if speaking it aloud might make him disappear again. How did you—" "Emma, baby, come here right now." But Emma seemed frozen between them, her young mind trying to process the tension in the air, the way her mother's voice had changed, the way the entire atmosphere of their small apartment had shifted in the space of a few seconds. "Mama," Emma said uncertainly, "this is the nice man from the factory, the one who said he knew Daddy. And Mama, he has the same eyes as me." The silence in the small apartment stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap at any moment. Sarah stared at Michael as if he were a mirage that might disappear if she blinked too hard. Her breathing shallow and rapid, Emma stood between them, her innocent observation about having the same eyes as Michael hanging in the air like a revelation that could change everything. "Sarah," Michael said gently, taking a careful step forward but stopping when he saw her flinch. "We need to talk about Emma, about what happened 7 years ago, about why you disappeared without a word when I was fighting for my life in that hospital." The accusation in his voice was subtle, but unmistakable, and Sarah's face crumpled as if he had slapped her. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice breaking with the weight of years of guilt and secrets. "You don't know what it was like. I waited, Michael. I waited in that hospital for 3 weeks while you were unconscious, while the doctors said you might never wake up, might never be the same person again." Emma looked back and forth between them, her young mind struggling to process the adult emotions swirling around her. "Mama, why are you crying? Is this man really my daddy? He said he might be, but he wasn't sure." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked at their daughter, then back at Michael. "Emma, baby, go to your room for a few minutes while Mama and this man have a grown-up talk, okay? Take your new rabbit and maybe draw him a picture. But Mama, I want to know about my daddy. You always said you'd tell me when I was older. But I'm older now. I'm 6 whole years old." Emma's voice carried the stubborn determination that Michael was beginning to recognize as a family trait. "Emma," Michael said softly, crouching down to her level, "your Mama and I have some very important things to discuss first. Adult things that might be confusing right now, but I promise you, whatever we talk about, you'll know everything you need to know very soon. Can you trust us for just a little while?" Emma studied his face with those piercing blue eyes that were so much like his own, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but don't leave without saying goodbye, promise." "I promise," Michael said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. As Emma reluctantly went to her small corner of the apartment, Sarah and Michael were left alone with 7 years of silence. Pain and unanswered questions stretching between them. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to hold the pieces of her composure together. "You want to know why I left?" Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I was 19 years old, pregnant and terrified. Because the doctors told me you had suffered severe brain trauma and might never be the same person I fell in love with. Because I had no money, no family, no way to support myself, let alone a baby." Michael felt his anger deflating as he began to understand the impossible position she had been in. But Sarah, if you had just waited a little longer, if you had trusted me, trusted you? Sarah's voice rose slightly, then dropped again as she remembered Emma was nearby. Michael, you were unconscious for 3 weeks. When you finally started waking up, you didn't remember me. You didn't remember our relationship, our plans, anything about us. The doctors said the memory loss might be permanent. The words hit him like physical blows. He had no memory of those early days of consciousness, no recollection of failing to recognize the woman he loved. The brain injury had stolen more than just time. It had stolen the moments when Sarah needed him most. I sat by your bedside every day, Sarah continued, tears streaming down her face. I held your hand and talked to you, told you about the baby, about our future together. But when you finally opened your eyes and looked at me, it was like looking at a stranger. You asked the nurse who I was. Michael sank into the worn armchair, the full weight of what had happened finally becoming clear. Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I don't remember any of that. The doctor said you might never remember our relationship, that the person you were before the accident might be gone forever. They said I needed to prepare myself for the possibility that you would need full-time care, that you might never work again, never be independent. Sarah's voice broke completely. I was pregnant, alone, and facing the possibility of caring for both a baby and a man who didn't even know who I was. The apartment felt smaller with the weight of their shared tragedy. Michael began to understand that there were no villains in this story, only 2 young people caught in circumstances beyond their control, making impossible decisions with incomplete information. So you left, Michael said quietly. You made the choice you thought was best for everyone. I made the choice I thought was necessary for survival, Sarah corrected. I was barely making ends meet working part-time jobs, and with a baby coming, I knew I couldn't afford medical bills for 2 people. I thought if I disappeared, you could focus on getting better without worrying about us, and maybe I could figure out how to raise a child on my own. The sacrifice she had made, the burden she had carried alone for 6 years, was staggering. While he had been recovering and rebuilding his life and business, she had been working multiple jobs, raising their daughter in poverty, never asking for help because she thought she was protecting him. Sarah, look at me, Michael said, standing and moving closer to her. I need you to understand something. My memory came back, not all at once, but gradually over the months after you left. I remembered you. I remembered us. I remembered how much I loved you. I hired private investigators. I spent thousands of dollars trying to find you. I never stopped looking. The revelation seemed to physically stagger her. You remembered. You looked for us. For 3 years, I turned over every stone, followed every lead. But you had vanished completely. No forwarding address, no contact with mutual friends, no trace anywhere. I thought you had left because you didn't want to be tied down to someone who might be permanently damaged. They stared at each other across the small room, both realizing how completely they had misunderstood the other's actions, how a series of tragic miscommunications had stolen 7 years of their lives and robbed Emma of her father. I changed my name, Sarah whispered. After Emma was born, I legally changed both our names to Thompson. I was so afraid you'd try to take her away if you found us, or that you'd feel obligated to help, even though you didn't remember loving me. Take her away? Michael's voice rose with incredulity. Sarah, she's my daughter, our daughter. The only thing I would have wanted was to be part of her life, to help you, to be the family we planned to be. From the corner of the apartment came Emma's small voice. Are you my daddy for real? Because if you are, does that mean you'll stay this time? Both adults turned to see Emma peeking around the corner, her new stuffed rabbit clutched tightly in her arms and her blue eyes wide with hope and fear. How long had she been listening? How much had she understood of their painful conversation? Emma, sweetheart, come here, Sarah said, opening her arms to their daughter. Mama needs to tell you something very important. Emma approached cautiously, clearly sensing the gravity of the moment. She climbed onto the couch next to Sarah, but kept her eyes fixed on Michael, studying his face as if trying to memorize every detail. Sarah took a shaky breath, then spoke with the careful precision of someone who knew their next words would change a child's life forever. "Emma, baby, this man is Michael Harrison. And yes, he is your daddy. He's the daddy I told you about, the one in the picture on the refrigerator." Emma's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, wonder, joy, and then a wariness that broke Michael's heart. "But why did he go away? Did I do something bad before I was born?" "Oh, sweetheart, no," Michael said, moving to kneel in front of the couch so he was at Emma's eye level. "You didn't do anything bad. Nothing that happened was your fault or your mama's fault. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes when they're scared and don't know what to do." "Are you going to go away again?" Emma asked, the question that clearly haunted her most. "Because Mama cries sometimes and says she misses you. But if you're going to leave again, maybe it's better if you just go now so she doesn't get sadder." The maturity in her words, the way she was trying to protect her mother, even in this moment of potential joy, told Michael everything he needed to know about the kind of person his daughter was becoming. Sarah had raised an extraordinary child, despite their difficult circumstances. "Emma, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Michael said, reaching out to gently take her small hands in his. "I am never going to leave you again. Never. I didn't know you existed. But now that I do, you and your mama are the most important things in the world to me." "More important than your big factory?" Emma asked skeptically. "Because Mama says rich people care more about money than about people sometimes." Michael glanced at Sarah, who looked embarrassed by their daughter's blunt assessment of wealthy people. "Emma, the factory, the money, all of it means nothing compared to you. Nothing at all. And I'm going to prove that to you every single day for the rest of our lives." Emma studied his face for a long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "Okay, I believe you, but I think you should know that Mama is the best mama in the whole world, even when we don't have very much money. She reads to me every night and makes the best pancakes, and she never gets mad when I ask too many questions." "She sounds like an amazing mama," Michael agreed, looking at Sarah with an expression of profound gratitude and regret. "And I'm very sorry that I wasn't here to help her take care of you." "It's okay," Emma said with the easy forgiveness of childhood. "You're here now, but I need to ask you something important." "Anything." "Sweetheart, can we afford real curtains now? Because the towel is fine, but it would be nice to have pretty curtains like the ones in the magazines." The simple request, the way it perfectly encapsulated their years of small deprivations, made both adults laugh and cry at the same time. Real curtains. Such a tiny thing, but it represented so much more: dignity, comfort, the ability to have choices about their living space. "Emma," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion, "we can afford real curtains. We can afford anything you and your mama need or want. Beautiful curtains, toys, books, clothes that fit properly, food for every meal. You'll never have to worry about money again." "But I like working," Emma said seriously. "I'm good at sewing, and it makes me feel helpful." "And you can keep sewing if you want to," Michael assured her. "But as a hobby, for fun, not because you have to. Little girls should be playing and learning and being kids, not working to pay rent." Sarah had been quiet during this exchange, watching the interaction between Michael and Emma with a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. Finally, she spoke up. "Michael, I need to know your intentions. Are you planning to fight me for custody? Because Emma and I have been through so much together, and I can't lose her." The fear in her voice was unmistakable, and Michael realized that she was still thinking like someone who had been alone and vulnerable for years. Someone who had learned to expect the worst from every situation. "Sarah, I don't want to fight you for anything," Michael said firmly. "I want to be part of Emma's life, but I also want to be part of yours, if you'll have me. I want us to be a family, the way we planned to be 7 years ago." "You want to be a family?" Emma's voice rose with excitement. "Like with a mama and a daddy in the same house, and maybe we could get a dog?" The hopeful question made them both laugh, despite the emotional intensity of the moment. "Maybe a dog," Michael agreed. "We'll have to see about that." But Sarah's expression remained troubled. "Michael, you don't understand. It's been 7 years. We're different people now. You're successful, sophisticated, used to a certain lifestyle. I'm a waitress with a 6-year-old daughter and no education beyond high school. We don't fit in your world. Then we'll make our own world," Michael said without hesitation. "Sarah, I've spent 7 years building a business empire. And do you know what I realized today? None of it matters without you and Emma. None of it has any meaning if I don't have a family to share it with." Emma had been listening to this adult conversation with focused attention. Finally, she spoke up. "Can I say something?" Both adults turned to her immediately. "Of course, sweetheart," Sarah said. "I think we should try being a family," Emma announced, with the certainty of someone who had given the matter serious consideration. "Because Mama is always sad when she thinks I'm not looking and she works too hard. And I think having a daddy would make her happier, and I would like to have a daddy who doesn't go away." The simple wisdom of their daughter's words seemed to settle something in both adults. They looked at each other across the small apartment, seeing not the successful businessman and struggling waitress they had become, but the young couple who had once planned a future together. "What do you think, Sarah?" Michael asked softly. "Are you willing to try?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her eyes moving between Michael and Emma as she wrestled with emotions and fears that had been building for 7 years. The small apartment suddenly felt charged with possibility and terror in equal measure. "I'm scared," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared that this is too good to be true, that something will go wrong, that you'll realize we don't fit into your life and you'll leave again. Emma's heart would break, and I don't think I could survive watching her go through that." Michael moved to sit on the coffee table directly in front of her, close enough to reach out and take her hands if she would let him. "Sarah, I understand your fear, I really do. But I need you to understand something. When I walked into that factory today and saw Emma working, when I realized she was my daughter, everything changed. Not just my day or my week, but my entire understanding of what my life is supposed to be about." He gestured around the small apartment, taking in the carefully maintained space, the evidence of their struggles, and the proof of Sarah's strength in raising Emma alone. "Look what you've accomplished. Look at the amazing person you've raised. You did that alone, without any help, while working multiple jobs and living in poverty. You're the strongest person I've ever known." Emma climbed down from the couch and moved to stand next to Michael, her small hand slipping into his with natural trust. "Mama, I think we should try, because if he's my real daddy, then maybe we were supposed to find each other again, like in the fairy tales you read to me." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked at their daughter, so hopeful and trusting despite everything she had been through. "Baby, real life isn't like fairy tales. Sometimes things don't work out the way we want them to, even when we try very hard. But sometimes they do," Emma insisted with the stubborn optimism of childhood. "And we won't know unless we try. Besides, I already like him, and he has the same nose as me." Michael laughed despite the emotional intensity of the moment. "She's right about the nose, and the eyes, and that determined expression she gets when she's made up her mind about something. That's definitely your expression," Sarah agreed, a small smile breaking through her worried demeanor. "She's been giving me that look since she could sit up on her own." The shared moment of humor seemed to ease some of the tension in the room, allowing them to breathe and consider possibilities rather than just obstacles. "Sarah," Michael said seriously, "I know this is overwhelming. I know you need time to process everything that's happened today, but I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. Whether you decide to give us another chance or not, I'm going to be part of Emma's life. I want to support both of you, regardless of what our relationship becomes." "What do you mean, support us?" Sarah asked, wariness creeping back into her voice. "I mean, I want to make sure you never have to worry about rent or food or Emma working in factories ever again." I want to pay for Emma's education, for her clothes, for everything she needs. I want to take care of the woman who took care of my daughter when I couldn't." Sarah's expression hardened slightly. "I don't want charity, Michael. I've been taking care of us just fine on my own." "It's not charity," Michael said firmly. "It's responsibility. It's what I should have been doing for the past 6 years if I had known. Sarah, you've sacrificed everything to raise our daughter. You've worked yourself to exhaustion, lived in poverty, watched Emma work in a factory because you had no other choice. Let me help. Let me take care of you the way I should have been doing all along." Emma had been listening to this exchange with growing concern. "Are you fighting? Because if you're going to fight, maybe you should do it when I'm not here. I don't like it when grown-ups yell." "We're not fighting." "Sweetheart," Sarah assured her quickly, "we're just trying to figure out how to make everything work." "Why don't we start small?" Michael suggested. "Sarah, let me help with immediate things. Let me pay your rent so you don't have to worry about being evicted. Let me buy Emma some clothes that fit properly and toys that are actually meant for children her age. Let me get you both moved to a safer neighborhood with better schools." "That doesn't sound small," Sarah pointed out. "Okay, you're right. Let me rephrase that. Let me help with everything, because you've been doing everything alone for 6 years, and you shouldn't have to anymore." Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below, where children were playing in the broken playground of their apartment complex. "I need time to think, Michael. This is all happening so fast, and I need to process what it means for Emma, for me, for all of us." "Of course," Michael said immediately. "Take all the time you need, but while you're thinking, can I ask you to consider something?" "What?" "Don't let Emma go back to that factory. Please, not even for one more day. I'll pay whatever she would have earned, but I can't stand the thought of her working in those conditions when she should be playing and going to school and being a kid." Sarah turned back to face him, and for the first time since he had walked into the apartment, she looked at him without fear or suspicion. "You really mean it, don't you, about wanting to be part of her life?" "I've never meant anything more in my entire life." Emma had been playing quietly with her stuffed rabbit, but now she looked up at both adults with serious consideration. "I have an idea," she announced. "What's your idea, sweetheart?" Sarah asked. "Why don't we try being a family for a little while and see how it goes? Like a test. And if it doesn't work out, then at least we tried, and nobody has to wonder what would have happened." Michael and Sarah looked at each other, both struck by the simple wisdom of their 6-year-old daughter's suggestion. "What kind of test did you have in mind?" Michael asked. Emma thought for a moment. "Well, maybe you could come have dinner with us sometimes, and maybe we could go do fun things together, like families do in the movies, and maybe Mama could quit her night job so she's not tired all the time, and we could all be together in the evenings." "That sounds like a wonderful test," Michael agreed. "What do you think, Sarah?" Sarah looked at their daughter, then at Michael, and finally at the past-due bills scattered across the kitchen table. The practical part of her brain was screaming warnings about trusting too much too quickly, but the part of her heart that had never stopped loving Michael was whispering that maybe, just maybe, they deserved a second chance at happiness. "Okay," she said quietly, "we can try, but we take it slow, and if anything feels wrong, or if Emma gets hurt or confused, we stop and reassess." "Absolutely," Michael agreed immediately. "And I keep working at the diner until we figure out how this is going to work long-term. I need to maintain some independence. I understand." Emma clapped her hands together with joy. "So we're going to be a family? A real family?" "We're going to try, baby," Sarah said, finally allowing herself to smile. "We're going to try." 3 weeks later, Michael stood in the kitchen of Sarah and Emma's new apartment, flipping pancakes, while Emma sat at the breakfast bar, chattering about her first day at her new school. The transformation in their lives had been dramatic and swift, but watching Emma's excitement about simple things like having her own bedroom and enough books to fill a small bookshelf made every change worthwhile. "And then Mrs. Peterson said I was the best reader in the whole first-grade class," Emma announced, bouncing slightly in her chair. She said I read like someone much older, and she wants to put me in the advanced reading group. That's wonderful. Sweetheart, Michael said, sliding a perfectly golden pancake onto her plate. Your mama always was a great reader too. She used to read to me sometimes when we were dating. Sarah emerged from the bedroom, dressed for her morning shift at a much nicer restaurant where Michael had helped her get a job closer to their new neighborhood. The dark circles under her eyes were starting to fade, and she had gained back some of the weight she had lost during their years of struggle. "Good morning," she said, accepting the cup of coffee Michael offered her with a grateful smile. "How did our little scholar sleep?" "Like a princess in my very own bed," Emma declared, "with real sheets and a real pillow and everything, and I had the best dream about getting a dog." Michael and Sarah exchanged glances over Emma's head. The dog conversation had come up several times over the past few weeks, and they both knew it was only a matter of time before they would need to make a decision. "Speaking of dogs," Michael said carefully, "I might have some news about that." Emma's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? What kind of news?" "Well, I was thinking that maybe this weekend we could visit the animal shelter and just look around. You know, see what kinds of dogs need homes." Emma's squeal of joy was so loud that Sarah laughed and covered her ears. "Really? We can get a real dog, our very own dog. We can look," Sarah cautioned, but she was smiling. "Looking doesn't mean we're definitely getting one, but it's a start," Emma said. "Already planning. I need to make a list of good names, and I need to learn about what dogs like to eat, and I need to figure out where the dog would sleep." As Emma chatted excitedly about dogs, Michael marveled at how natural this felt, making breakfast for his family, listening to Emma's school stories, sharing quiet morning moments with Sarah. It was everything he had dreamed of 7 years ago, and everything he had thought he had lost forever. The integration hadn't been without its challenges. Emma had struggled initially with having a father figure after years of just her and her mother. Sarah had wrestled with accepting help after years of fierce independence, and Michael had to learn how to be part of a family rather than just a successful businessman. But gradually, they had found their rhythm. Michael had been patient with Emma's questions and occasional wariness. Sarah had slowly allowed him to help with decisions and responsibilities, and Emma had blossomed in the security of having 2 parents and knowing she would never have to worry about basic necessities again. "I have some news too," Sarah said, as Emma finally paused her dog planning to eat her pancakes. "Mrs. Rodriguez at the restaurant asked if I wanted to apply for the assistant manager position." Michael's face lit up with pride. "Sarah, that's fantastic. You've only been there 3 weeks. She says I have good people skills and I'm a quick learner. It would mean better hours, better pay, and more responsibility." Sarah paused, then added quietly, "It would mean I could finally start building a real career instead of just working survival jobs." The significance of this wasn't lost on Michael. For the first time in years, Sarah was able to think beyond just getting through each day. She could make plans, consider her future, pursue opportunities that had been impossible when every moment was focused on basic survival. "I think you should definitely apply," Michael said. "You're smart, hard-working, and great with people. They'd be lucky to have you as a manager." Emma looked up from her pancakes. "What's an assistant manager?" "It means Mama would be the boss of some of the other workers," Michael explained. "She would help make decisions and solve problems." "Mama's good at solving problems," Emma said matter-of-factly. "She solved the problem of not having enough money by getting 2 jobs, and she solved the problem of me being sad about not having a daddy by finding you." The simple statement made both adults pause. From Emma's perspective, their reunion had been orchestrated by her mother's problem-solving abilities, rather than the cosmic coincidence it had actually been. "I didn't exactly find him, baby," Sarah said gently. "He found us. But you kept his picture, and you told me good things about him, so when he found us, I knew he was okay to trust," Emma pointed out with 6-year-old logic. "That's problem-solving." Michael reached over and ruffled Emma's hair affectionately. "She's got a point there. Your mama is definitely a problem solver." As they finished breakfast and prepared for their respective days, Emma to school, Sarah to work, Michael to the office, Michael reflected on how completely his priorities had changed. 3 weeks ago, his biggest concerns had been quarterly profits and expansion plans. Now his thoughts revolved around school pickup times, family dinners, and making sure Emma and Sarah felt secure and loved. "Michael," Sarah said as she gathered her purse and jacket, "I wanted to talk to you about something tonight, after Emma goes to bed." "Is everything okay?" he asked, immediately alert to any sign of trouble. "Everything's fine," she assured him quickly. "I just think it's time we talked about some long-term things. About where we see this going, what we want for our future." Michael nodded, understanding the importance of that conversation. They had been living day by day, rebuilding their relationship and establishing their family dynamic, but eventually they would need to make decisions about their permanent future. "I'll pick Emma up from school today," he offered. "That way you can take your time at work, especially if you want to talk to Mrs. Rodriguez about the manager position." "Are you sure? I know you have that board meeting this afternoon." "I rescheduled it," Michael said without hesitation. "Emma is more important than any board meeting." Sarah smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes and reminded him of the young woman he had fallen in love with 7 years ago. "Thank you for everything, for being patient with us, for letting us figure this out at our own pace." "Thank you for giving me a second chance," Michael replied. "For letting me be part of Emma's life, part of your life." Emma, who had been listening to this exchange while finishing her orange juice, suddenly announced, "I love our family. Even if we're still figuring things out, I love that we're all together." Both adults felt their hearts melt at their daughter's words. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever decisions they needed to make about their future, they were facing them together as a family. That evening, after Emma had been tucked into bed with her new collection of books and her stuffed rabbit, Michael and Sarah sat on the couch in their comfortable living room, the weight of unspoken decisions hanging between them. The apartment was quiet, except for the gentle hum of the heater and the distant sounds of the city beyond their windows. "This feels surreal sometimes," Sarah said softly, curling her legs under her as she settled into the corner of the couch. 3 weeks ago, I was working double shifts and worrying about eviction. Now Emma has her own room. I'm applying for management positions, and we're talking about getting a dog." Michael shifted to face her more fully, noting how different she looked in the soft lamplight of their new home compared to the exhausted woman he had found sleeping on that old couch. "Do you regret it, letting me back into your lives?" "No," Sarah said immediately, then paused. "But I'm scared about what comes next. We've been living in this bubble where everything is new and exciting, but eventually reality is going to set in. We're going to have disagreements about Emma, about money, about our relationship." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. We've been in crisis mode, dealing with immediate needs and changes, but we haven't really talked about the big picture." "The big picture," Sarah repeated. "Like whether you want more children someday. Like whether I'm comfortable with Emma being around your business associates and the kind of wealth you're used to. Like whether we're rebuilding our old relationship or trying to create something completely new." The questions hung in the air between them, in the air, each one representing months or years of conversations and decisions that would shape their family's future. "Can I tell you what I want?" Michael asked. "Please, I want to marry you," he said simply. "Not because of Emma, not because it's the expected thing to do, but because I never stopped loving you. These past 3 weeks have reminded me of why I fell in love with you in the first place, and they've also shown me who you've become. You're stronger, more independent, more sure of yourself than you were 7 years ago." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Michael, I know it's too soon to be talking about marriage," he continued quickly. "I know we have a lot of work to do, a lot of trust to rebuild, but I wanted you to know that's where my heart is, where I hope we're heading eventually." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing his words and her own feelings. 7 years ago, if you had proposed, I would have said yes immediately. But that girl was naive and hadn't been tested by real hardship. I need to know that you love who I am now, not just who I used to be. Sarah, who you are now is incredible. You raised our daughter to be kind, intelligent, and resilient while working multiple jobs and living in poverty. You never let bitterness make you cruel. Never let desperation make you selfish. You kept my picture and spoke of me with love, even though you thought I had abandoned you. The woman you've become is everything I could have hoped for and more than I deserve. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, but they were tears of relief rather than sadness. I love you too, she whispered. I never stopped loving you, even when I tried to convince myself that I had moved on. But I need time, Michael. I need to know that this isn't just the excitement of finding each other again, that we can build something lasting. We have all the time in the world, Michael assured her. I'm not going anywhere. From down the hallway came Emma's voice. Mama, Daddy, I can't sleep. They both smiled at the casual way Emma had started calling Michael Daddy over the past week, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Coming, baby? Sarah called back, but Michael stood first. I'll go, he said. You've been doing bedtime duty alone for 6 years. Let me handle tonight. As Michael walked down the hallway to Emma's room, Sarah reflected on how much their lives had changed. The man she had fallen in love with had grown into someone who prioritized family over business, who rearranged board meetings to pick up their daughter from school, who wanted to handle bedtime stories and middle-of-the-night comfort. Daddy? She heard Emma's voice from her bedroom. What's wrong, sweetheart? Bad dream? No, I just wanted to ask you something important. What's that? Are you and Mama going to get married? Because Jimmy at school said that's what mamas and daddies do when they love each other. Sarah held her breath, waiting to hear how Michael would handle their daughter's direct question. Well, Michael said carefully, your mama and I love each other very much, and we love you more than anything in the world. But marriage is a big decision that grown-ups have to think about very carefully. But you want to marry her, right? Because she's the best mama ever, and she makes really good pancakes, and she sings pretty songs when she thinks nobody is listening. Sarah smiled in the darkness of the living room, touched by their daughter's advocacy. I think your mama is pretty wonderful too, Michael agreed. But the most important thing is that we're a family now, whether we get married or not. You, me, and Mama, we're going to be together no matter what. Good, Emma said with satisfaction. Because I like having a daddy, and I don't want you to go away again. I'm never going away again, Emma. That's a promise I will keep forever. Okay, can you sing me the song Mama always sings? The one about the mockingbird? 20 minutes later, Michael returned to the living room to find Sarah curled up with a photo album she hadn't shown him yet. What's that? He asked, settling beside her on the couch. Emma's baby book, Sarah said softly. I kept track of everything. Her first smile, first word, first steps. I always hoped that someday her father would want to see these memories. As they spent the next hour going through the album together, sharing stories and filling in the gaps of Emma's early years, both Sarah and Michael felt the final pieces of their broken family beginning to click back into place. 6 months later, Michael stood in the kitchen of their new house, a beautiful colonial in a family-friendly neighborhood with excellent schools, watching Sarah help Emma get ready for her first day of 2nd grade. The morning sunlight streamed through actual curtains that Emma had picked out herself, and the sound of their golden retriever puppy Buddy playing in the backyard added to the domestic symphony that had become Michael's favorite soundtrack. Mama, I can't find my new pencil box, Emma called from upstairs, her voice carrying the slight panic that always accompanied important first days. Check your backpack, sweetheart, Sarah called back, simultaneously packing Emma's lunch and reviewing the list of supplies they had prepared the night before. And don't forget to brush your teeth. Michael marveled at how seamlessly they had all adapted to this new life. The house was everything he had dreamed of when he was recovering from the accident 7 years ago. A real family home with space for Emma to play, a yard where Buddy could run, and enough bedrooms for future additions to their family. The past 6 months had not been without challenges. Emma had struggled initially with changing schools again, even though the new school was significantly better than her previous one. Sarah had needed time to adjust to not working multiple jobs, to having the luxury of focusing on family and her new management position at an upscale restaurant downtown. "Daddy, can you help me with my backpack?" Emma asked, appearing in the kitchen with her hair slightly disheveled and her new school dress on backwards. "Of course, Princess," Michael said, the endearment coming naturally now after months of practice. "But first, let's turn your dress around and fix your hair." As he helped Emma with her morning routine, Michael reflected on how much he had learned about parenting. Simple things like the importance of consistent bedtimes, the art of negotiating over vegetables, and the delicate balance between setting boundaries and allowing independence. "Are you nervous about second grade?" he asked Emma as he carefully braided her hair the way Sarah had taught him. "A little bit," Emma admitted, "but Mrs. Johnson seems really nice. And I already know some kids from summer camp, and you and Mama said you would always pick me up after school, right?" "Right," Michael confirmed. "Either Mama or I will always be there. You never have to worry about that." Sarah appeared in the kitchen, dressed professionally for her job, but still radiating the warmth that had first attracted Michael all those years ago. "Everyone ready for the big day?" "I think so," Emma said, shouldering her new backpack with determination. As they prepared to leave for school, Michael caught Sarah's hand and squeezed it gently. "How are you feeling about today?" "Good," Sarah said, and meant it. "Nervous, but good. Emma's excited, she's well prepared, and she knows we're both here if she needs anything." The drive to Emma's new school was filled with chatter about her teacher, her classroom, and her hopes for making new friends. When they arrived at the cheerful brick building with its well-maintained playground and bright welcome banners, Emma's excitement overcame her nervousness. "It's so much bigger than my old school," she observed, taking in the sprawling campus with wide-eyed wonder. As they walked Emma to her classroom, Michael was struck by how different this experience was from what Emma's first day of first grade must have been like. Then Sarah would have been rushing from her night shift at the diner, probably worried about missing work time, uncertain about whether they could afford school supplies. Now, both parents were present, relaxed, and focused entirely on Emma's comfort and success.